Hey guys, welcome to Boxing Squared for boxing news and views from around the internet. And another heavyweight news mashup video today, starting with the American heavyweight Michael Hunter, who believed he would still be fighting with Matchroom as he thought he still had more fights left on his deal. So he told the Boxing UK YouTube channel that he still thought he had 2 fights left on his Matchroom deal, but he went on to say when there's not the same love and feedback, it was time to part ways. He expressed that there was no bad blood and that the parting was made all official over email. But he believes that the whole COVID situation had a lot to do with it, and at the end of the day, it was about timing. But he did say that he didn't feel like he was a Matchroom project, something that Matchroom was working on and pushing towards something, rather that he was part of the overall project. And later in the interview, he also stated that he wants to fight Tyson Fury. He spoke about their fight from the amateur days and that he had it all over Tyson Fury. And he's done another interview with Seconds Out, and there's a couple of things that I want to get to in that. But first, the Boxing UK interview. It's interesting that he still thought he was part of the fold, but then all of a sudden, he was out. So, it's hard to know what's really going on here because we're probably not going to get the real story. We're going to get 2 sides of it, but maybe not the whole truth, if you see what I mean. And Hunter has definitely shown a reluctance to sort of get stuck into Matchroom at this time. And that's most likely because he wants to keep the door open, because he probably feels like he hasn't burned a bridge. But the current situation with COVID, and he says it's a timing thing, he could re-enter the fray at some point, be that on a contract or maybe being brought in as an opponent. So I think he's being smart here in terms of he's looking at this as it's just a business thing, and that at some point he could be certainly back in the fold. And we've seen that with heavyweights all over who leave promoters, come back. So I think Michael Hunter is playing the long game here. And remembering, he is number 4 in the IBF, and that has certainly been in a lot of interviews mentioned how high he is in the IBF, but it's worth noting he's ranked across all sanctioning bodies right now. One of the few heavyweights who's across all 4 major sanctioning bodies. So as a free agent, he's probably got some options, but maybe at the moment with no crowds, and obviously boxing is starting to trickle back, he might just have to wait a little while before he gets a shot, either against a Matchroom fighter or with a PBC promotion or top rank promotion. But he is, obviously with the rankings, he could be an attractive proposition, generally regarded as a guy who is a top 10 heavyweight in the division right now. So I think Hunter has some options, but at the same time, he is going to be brought in as an opponent, as instead of a guy who is going to be headlining. But I guess with what Hunter is saying, he wasn't really getting that promotional push from Matchroom, and he wasn't sort of being pushed as a potential A-side in the future. So we'll have to see where Michael Hunter goes in terms of the what next. But, I think he's got some bargaining power, but at the same time, when you're out, I don't want to say in the wilderness, but when you're outside the sort of major 3 promotional silos that we seem to have at the moment, Matchroom, PBC, and also Top Rank, it does become a little bit harder. He is on the outside looking in. And for his purposes, not talking about bad about Matchroom, that's a good thing because he wants to keep all doors open and not burn any bridges on the way out. And the whole Tyson Fury thing, this is something he's mentioned before, but I think at this point he's a bit too far off the radar to be in line for a Tyson Fury fight. Okay, so just getting on to the Seconds Out interview where he said many of the same things as the Boxing UK one, but he also stated, Dillian Whyte's going to be constantly running from me. And he also said that he's working on getting back to the UK as most of his fan base is there, and he would like to give back to those people who have been giving to him. And that he's had a lot of phone calls since parting ways with Matchroom, but he realizes these people aren't his friends, it's just business, but he's open to talking to them. So there's a bit to unpack there. I guess the last bit first. I'm sure he is getting a bit of interest, but at the moment with the current pandemic and no fans, and Hunter not having the highest profile in the world but being a very good fighter, he's kind of in a good position, but he's also kind of not, because he doesn't bring a massive amount of interest to a card beyond, hardcore boxing fans. He doesn't have a massive casual following. And I guess some of that is amplified by that second statement that he made about that he's working to get back to the UK as most of his fan base is there. He is an American heavyweight who's fought most of his heavyweight career in the United States. He was a DAZN fighter in the United States, but he doesn't actually have a massive following, and that's probably part of, potentially for Matchroom, the issue that they had with him, because he was there pretty much after Miller failed tests a year ago. Hunter became the heavyweight for DAZN in the United States, but his profile, he hasn't really broken through. Some of that you can certainly, I think, put down to he hasn't had a big promotional push by Matchroom, but I think some fighters are just like that. Good personality, good fighter, but they don't have that mass casual appeal, or at least to this point he hasn't sort of broken through. And at this time with the pandemic, I think maybe what he says in that other interview with Boxing UK, that it's a timing thing, I think there's a lot of truth to that. But the fact that he says most of his fan base is in the UK shows that he doesn't probably have much of a fan base in the US, and that might be a problem for Matchroom and DAZN at this point, because they want some of those bigger name fighters to really be pushing their product at this point. And I guess to some extent, it feels like Hunter had been treated like a bit of a spare wheel used to fill out cards, and clearly he didn't want that. But this other talk about that Dillian Whyte's going to be constantly running from him, that he would have to be great and, beyond and get his name up there, be massive for Dillian Whyte to consider fighting him because Whyte fights in money fights. I guess really that is true to some extent in terms of Whyte does go for those money fights. Hunter maybe doesn't have the profile to get Dillian Whyte interested here, but part of this as well, that now Hunter is cut adrift. He has to generate some comments and some headlines, some publicity for himself, and he probably wants to start seeding a rivalry with Dillian Whyte. Until this point, there hasn't really been one. And to sort of say that Dillian Whyte's going to be constantly running from him, until this point, I don't think anyone's really sort of paired them up too much or thought that Whyte was running from Hunter, but Hunter will want to create that narrative now. He'll keep repeating it, I'm sure, as he will keep repeating that he gave it to Tyson Fury in the amateur days, and he wants to sort of settle the score there too. The top-ranked prospect, Jared Anderson, who goes by the nickname Big Baby, says that he's been holding his tongue, trying not to speak out on the situation, but y'all can't kill the noise about changing my name. It's Big Baby, plain and simple. I'm not him and not associated with him. This name tattooed on my body twice. I'm not changing for nobody. And Anderson referring to the other big baby of the heavyweight division, Jarrell Miller, who again has failed a PED test. And Anderson, when he came into the division with the nickname Big Baby, I think there were a number of people sort of commenting, why has he gone for that nickname? Because there was already a big baby. But this is probably one of these things, even in the amateurs, he's had that nickname for some time. But it is an odd nickname to have to some extent, but obviously he likes it. He's got it tattooed. And the situation with Miller in the past week or so has clearly got people sort of saying, do you really want to be associated with that name? But if Big Baby Jared Anderson does go on to have a sparkling career, then people will probably remember Big Baby and associate with him rather than Miller. Maybe. We'll have to see on that one. Obviously, time can only sort of prove that one out. Carlos Takam, who will be facing Jerry Forrest on July 9th, has said on social media, "My friends, the support you all show me is very much appreciated, and I will be victorious next Thursday evening for you all. I would like to follow some of you who follow and encourage me daily." Carlos Takam and Jerry Forrest, I think that's a very even fight, and I think with Carlos Takam being 39 years old now, there is a question if the younger, fresher man in Forrest can give Takam some movement because he doesn't deal with that so well. Can he sort of outpoint Carlos Takam, who likes to sort of have an up-close fight where he's letting his hands go, a la the Derek Chisora fight? The Colombian heavyweight Oscar Rivas has posted training footage for the first time since undergoing arthroscopic surgery on his right elbow. Rivas had been scheduled to face Carlos Takam. He would have been facing him on that July 9th date, but then with the elbow becoming a real issue, he underwent the knife to correct the issue. So hopefully Oscar Rivas can come back and be in a good fight soon. I think if Carlos Takam does beat Jerry Forrest, it would be good to see those two in a fight. They're almost a mirror image in terms of the height and the build, very heavily muscled, both of them up top, and I think it would be quite a competitive and up close, a lot of action in that fight. But if Carlos Takam loses to Jerry Forrest, maybe that fight will disappear, but hopefully Oscar Rivas getting back to action sooner rather than later. He's expected to be laid up for about 3 months. And Derek Chisora, he has again teased that he's going to MMA. See here on screen, saying at Bellator MMA, I'm ready for anyone. And he's posted a series of images and even the odd video in recent months saying that he would like to go to MMA. And this is at the same time that he's meant to be fighting Alexander Usyk at some point. That fight, originally scheduled for May, had to be pushed back due to the pandemic. Talk of it happening potentially in October or November, but it is still to be determined when that fight will be rescheduled for. So there is a question, I mean, how serious is Chisora about going to MMA, or is this just more a case that he's getting some good cross-training in, and perhaps it's a misdirection from Chisora trying to get Alexander Usyk to maybe think about something else or let his guard down to some extent, trying to get some sort of point across and make Usyk be on edge to some extent mentally. Who knows? It's Chisora, he's into the mind games. What do you make of it all? Drop a comment, loud and often, hit like, hit subscribe, follow me on Twitter, boxing_squared. I'm out.